I'm so glad to see you guys today. You have no idea. You know, something really I want to point out that I don't think I've done near enough of, and I know for sure I haven't done it enough lately. I want you guys to know how appreciative I am that I get to be a part of this congregation. When I got here the first time, I was 17 years old, and I really didn't know much of anything at all, to be honest. And I thought I was a lot cooler, and I thought I was a lot better at speaking than I was. And yeah, we're having technical difficulties. You're just going to have to excuse that. Our Wi-Fi is having some issues. No big deal. But I want you guys to know how much of an encouragement you've been to me. And I want you all to know that there was a time, seriously, when I questioned whether or not ministry was for me. And I questioned whether or not that was really what I wanted to do with my life. And I fought it, and I wrestled with it, and I wrestled with it. And you guys are a huge part of the reason, really the biggest reason that I'm still in ministry. And that now I'm to the point where I don't see myself ever doing anything else for the rest of my life. And you guys are just... you guys mean a lot to me, and you guys are really special, and I appreciate you so much for encouraging me. You have no idea how much it means, and I want to appeal to those of you who are either visiting with us today, or maybe those of you who haven't been here very long. Maybe you've been coming for a while, but you haven't been here very long. I want you to know that you're exactly where God wants you to be. I want you to know that you are a part of something now. If you so choose to be, you are a part of something that is beyond special. I want you to know that you have the option, the opportunity to belong to a group of people who love you. And you have the opportunity to belong to a group of people who care about you and who want to see you succeed in your faith. You know, I've been really guilty in the past if I get up here and you know the old joke, well, what did the preacher preach about this morning? He preached about sin and he was against it. You've heard that before. I think I'm as guilty as anyone sometimes. I get up here and I just get on something and I'm talking about sin and how hard we have to try to avoid it and talk about, you know, just beat ourselves up, myself included. But I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to do that. Not that we don't ever address sin and talk about it, because that's important. But what I want to talk about as much as anything, I want to talk about how badly we want you to be successful. How badly we want you to get to a place where your faith will not be shaken, and that you are in a position where nothing is ever going to take your faith away from you. That's what we're trying to get to. That's what I'm trying to get to with the youth group, with my youth kids. Trying to get to a point that college, whatever it is, that, you know, the daily struggles of life every single day, to where none of that shakes them, to where they're ready to go and live a life of faith in Jesus, and nothing is ever going to take that away from them. I want the same for you guys. That's what this is all about. And as I'm thinking about our lesson today, you can go ahead and turn to John chapter 15. That's where we will be the whole duration of the sermon. John chapter 15, one of my very favorite chapters in all of the Bible. I don't think you'll disagree with this. Every single person, with no exceptions, every single person in the world wants a life of abundance. Every single person in the world wants a life of peace. Right? Every single person wants a life of satisfaction. Every single person wants a life of joy. Right? Every single person, no exception. You want a life of abundance, peace, joy, satisfaction, all of those things. And what I find so tragic is that all of these people, that they know what they want, but in all seriousness, they have no idea where to find it. They try to fill their life with whatever it is, and they don't know where to find abundance. They don't know where to find a life of purpose. They don't know where to find a life of peace and joy and all those other things that we've been talking about. But you and I, we know exactly where to find it, don't we? We know that type of life that every single person with no exception is looking for, we know that only comes through knowing Jesus. It only comes through knowing exactly who He is and having relationship with Him. And this morning, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about how to come to a knowledge of what it is to really and truly, deeply, intimately know Jesus. You know, as I mentioned, every single person, with no exception, is looking for this life of joy, peace, abundance, satisfaction. And so often they don't know where to find it. But something I find just as tragic as those people are those of us who think that we know Jesus, and really we don't have the slightest clue of what knowing Jesus looks like. And I know that that's the case because I see it in the people in their wavering. I see that there's some kind of disconnect. I feel like so many of us, I'm going to say us, I'm not going to say you, I'm going to say us. We convince ourselves that we know Jesus, and we don't have the slightest clue as to what that really means and what that really looks like on a practical level. I think John 15 lays that out perfectly. Absolutely perfectly. You know, as always, I always have a goal. Every single time I preach, I have something that I want you to leave with. I have a goal. I have a mission in mind every single time. And my goal, my mission for today is this. I want you to leave here understanding exactly what it takes to know Jesus. And not only do I want you leaving here understanding exactly what it is to know Jesus, I want you to crave it. I want you to thirst for it. I want you to leave here so excited about this man called Jesus that you can't help but talk about Him. And you can't help but think about Him. And you can't help but be so inseparably connected that your life will never be the same. Now, will we accomplish that? Well, really, that's up to you, right? Only you can decide that for yourself. And decide to let Jesus come inside. You know, this idea of knowing Jesus is actually something that Jesus Himself often mentioned, that idea of knowing Him. And I think you'll be surprised at what knowing Him does mean and what it doesn't mean. I want to put a couple scriptures up here on the screen. The first one of them being John chapter 14 and verse 7. And I find this so interesting. It says, "If you had known me, you would have known my Father also." There's that idea of knowing Jesus. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you know Him and have seen Him. Now, I'll tell you why I find that so interesting. Jesus is speaking to a group of people who have spent every waking moment of their life for the past few years with Him. Isn't that interesting? Jesus is speaking to His apostles, His disciples, a group of people who have spent a lot of time with Jesus. Every single day, for a couple years span, they've been with Jesus. They've been listening to His teaching. They've been trying to follow in His steps. And then Jesus drops this bombshell. He says, "If you had known me." In other words, you don't really know me at all. Even though you've been spending all this time with me, you still don't know me. And then another one up here on the screen, I think this is the one that's really, really frightening. "Many will say to me on that day," that is Judgment Day, "Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name cast out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you." There's that word again. Jesus says, "I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness." I'll tell you why that's frightening. These were obviously very religious people. These are people who were prophesying in the name of Jesus. In the name of Jesus, casting out demons, performing many miracles. And then Jesus again drops the bombshell. What does He say? "You never knew me. I never knew you. We never had a relationship." Despite the fact that they had been working, Jesus still says, "We never knew each other." Understand, us, we, I want to keep saying that, not you. Us, we. For us, it is possible to have been going to church for a long, long time. Maybe even a large portion of your life. It is possible that you've been at every event that you've been serving for a long time, it is possible for all of those things to have happened, and you still don't know Jesus. And as crazy as that sounds, that's exactly what we're talking about today. I want you to picture a heavy storm, or maybe even a tornado. For us that have lived here in Oklahoma for very long, that's not very hard to do, okay? We're kind of used to this whole tornado thing. And something I've always found so crazy is you see some of the destruction that causes in cities. It'll go and, just ask more, okay? It'll go and level the whole city and just completely wipe out everything. And then as it'll go through a pasture or something, it'll come to a group of trees. And, granted, a lot of them will get laid over, whatever, but I think it's so interesting that sometimes a tornado will travel right through a group of trees, and there will still be trees standing whenever there were buildings that weren't able to withstand the power. You know what I mean? I always found that so fascinating. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that the same tornado that wipes out, levels cities, can sometimes pass through a group of trees and not yank all of the trees out of the ground? How is that possible? I'll tell you how it's possible. Because the trees are so deeply rooted and grounded that even a tornado could not pull them out of the ground. You know exactly where I'm going with this, don't you? My goal, what I want for you, is to be so completely rooted and grounded in Jesus that no storm, and there's going to be storms in life, by the way, right? That's life. It's unfair. There are going to be storms. My goal, what I want for you, is to be so rooted, so grounded in Jesus that nothing will ever take you away from Him, Satan included. What does it mean to know Jesus? That's exactly what he's talking about in John 15. I'm going to share with you this morning 4 keys, really important keys, coming straight from here in John 15. 4 keys to knowing Jesus, and each one will build on the other. I think it's really cool how the text does this, but we'll talk about that a little later on. So, keys to knowing Jesus. Well, first of all, the key to knowing Jesus is bearing fruit. The key to knowing Jesus is bearing fruit. Look with me starting in verse 1. It says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, He takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, He prunes it, so that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. So I think immediately we see Jesus is saying, first of all, I am the true vine. Doesn't that tell you something already off the top? If Jesus is saying, I am the true vine, then doesn't that also mean there have to be false vines? Right? There are also false vines. There are vines that are very encompassing that you can attach yourself to. And I'll let you fill in the blank on whatever those things might be. But if Jesus is the true vine, then obviously there are false vines. There are false things that you can find yourself encompassed in or connected to that are going to hurt you. But Jesus says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, listen to this, every branch in me that does not bear fruit, He takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, He prunes it, so that it may bear more fruit. You and I, we're the branches. We're not that important. The vine can live without the branches, right? We're not that important. We're just the branches. But you see, when the branches, man, I love John 15. When the branches are connected to the vine that is Jesus, naturally, we can't help but bear fruit. You know what I mean? If you are connected to the totally awesome vine that is Jesus, it'll come natural to you. You can't help but go and bear fruit in yourself and in other people as well. You can't help it. And so if we're not bearing fruit, what does that maybe mean? Well, maybe that means we're not connected to the vine. Therefore, not bearing fruit. What does it mean to bear fruit? Well, I think about fruit, and I think about the fact that if we're connected to the vine that is Jesus, we can't help but bear fruit over and over and over again, not just one time. Isn't that how fruit works, by the way? Connected to a vine, if it's a good plant, year after year, it will constantly be producing nice, good to eat type of fruit. First of all, what do we know about fruit? Well, first of all, you can see fruit, right? You can see it. Just like your flowers in your flower bed. You can see when a flower is blooming, can you not? You can look at it and you can tell how it's doing. If it's blooming, if it's not, whatever. I'm not much of a gardener, okay? Everything in there would die if I tried planting anything or flowers, whatever. Black thumb, okay? So I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert in this, okay? But I think the beautiful thing is I don't have to be, because Jesus is laying it out for us. So maybe for those of you sitting there thinking, okay, check it out, not much on gardening and planting, that's okay. You can still get this, okay? You're in the same boat as I am. It's impossible to know Jesus without bearing fruit. Well, you can see fruit, right? What does it mean to bear fruit? First of all, you can see it. You can see when a person is bearing fruit. Here's a really personal question, and it kind of goes back to something we were talking about in youth this morning. You probably will already have somebody in your mind. Can you think of a person that you have gotten to see personally bearing fruit? Can you think of a person in your mind that you know is a fruit-bearing type of disciple? That they bear fruit over and over and over again, and they impact lives over and over and over again. Can you think of that person in your mind? And you can see it. You can just see how totally in love with Jesus they are. Isn't that infectious? Can you think of that person that you know that's excited about their faith? They're in love with Jesus. They're bearing fruit. Maybe you have that person in your mind. Don't forget that person in your mind. That's bearing fruit. You can see it. You can tell when a person is really bearing fruit for Jesus. Well, what does that look like exactly? Well, first of all, it has to start with winning souls. It has to start there. Because if we can't get ourselves to go and tell people about Jesus, then we're wasting our time with everything else. It has to start there. First and foremost, it is an overwhelmingly gigantic portion of what the Bible is all about. Taking fruit and helping someone else bear fruit too. So what does it mean to bear fruit? Well, first of all, it has got to start with winning souls for Jesus. That life of joy and abundance and peace that you have, don't you want someone else to have it too? Do you know those people that they're going through calamity, they're going through something in their life, and in your head you're sitting there thinking, I know exactly what you need. I know exactly what you need. You need Jesus. You need to know Him. That would solve a lot of your problem. Do you know those people? The type of life that you have, do you want that for someone else? Bearing fruit has got to start there. If you're not willing to start there, then you can go ahead and check out. Don't listen to a word I'm going to say the rest of this sermon, because I don't think it applies to you. If you're not willing to start going and winning souls, that is the start of bearing fruit. You're probably familiar. What else does it look like? Here up on the scripture that's up here on the screen, you're probably familiar with Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23. We call these the fruit of the Spirit. It says in Galatians 5:22, starting in verse 22, it says, But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Do you see yourself in that list? Do you see yourself? I mean, really think about it. Dig deep for a second. Do you see yourself in that list in fruits of the Spirit in Galatians 5? Are you a person who's good at love and joy and peace, patience, all these things that are mentioned that are the fruits of the Spirit? What does it mean, the fruit of the Spirit? Well, what that's clearly talking about is a person who is walking in the Spirit. Not walking in the flesh, but who is walking in the Spirit. In other words, walking with Jesus. This is what they look like. Do you see yourself on that list? And I'll ask myself this same question, I promise. Do we see ourselves in Galatians 5? Am I really a Galatians 5 disciple? And if you find yourself not in Galatians 5, if you can't find yourself in that list, then you already know where to start, right? You know where to start. You've got to find yourself on this list. The person who is bearing the fruits of the Spirit. But there's more to it. So it starts here. The key to knowing Jesus is bearing fruit, but there's more to it than this. Watch how this works, okay? The key to bearing fruit is abiding. It's really neat. The key to knowing Jesus is bearing fruit, but the key to bearing fruit is abiding. Start looking in verse 4 if you don't believe that. In verse 4, Jesus says, "Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, so neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine. You are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, he bears much fruit." See how that works? The one that abides in Jesus and Jesus abides in cannot help but he bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away as a branch and dries up. And they gather them and they cast them into the fire and they are burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. Just as the Father has loved me, I have also loved you. Abide in my love. You see how that works? If you want to know Jesus, you have got to bear fruit. People have to see the fact that you're working for Him and toiling for Him. How do you bear fruit? Well, the key to bearing fruit is abiding. And if you're finding yourself saying, well, maybe I'm not really abiding in Jesus. Well, before we get to that, what does it mean to abide? It's a pretty good question, isn't it? Sometimes we see these words in the Bible and we talk about them over and over and over again. And then in all reality, what we're doing is wasting our time because we really don't understand what the words mean. They sound good, but we don't really understand what it means. Well, what does it mean to abide? Well, think about this. The place where you live is called your abode. Your abode, right? Your home. You know, we call our humble abode, whatever. Okay, so you have your abode, the place where you live. So that means that you abide in your abode. Does that make sense? You abide in your abode. That's where you live. That's where you spend your time. That's what, unfortunately, sometimes we're devoted to. Okay? The key to bearing fruit is abiding, and the key to abiding here, what does it mean to abide? Well, it means to live in. Man, I really like this one. It means to live in Jesus. Live in the Spirit. Abiding in Jesus means that you live in Jesus. That every single day, that's who you're thinking about when you wake up. That's who you're thinking about when you go to bed. As you're going through your work day or your day at the house, whatever your situation is, as you're going throughout your day, He's in your head. And He's in your heart. And you can't help but think about Him and think about how you can be better at glorifying Him. You know what it means to live for Jesus, right? You know what that looks like, to abide in Him. That's what you're thinking about. That's what you can't help but think about. And not only, I think this is really interesting as you look here. If you abide in me, abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be done for you. Man, isn't that a cool promise that God gives us? As disciples, God said, you abide in me, ask my Father for something and see if He won't give it to you. Now, that doesn't mean saying, okay, God, give me a Lambo and a Lambo's going to magically show up at your door. That's not what we're talking about. The key to bearing fruit is abiding. Abiding is about living in Jesus. It's an everyday thing. Are you a disciple on Sunday? Are you a disciple on Wednesday? Those are good questions, but the real question is, are you a disciple on Monday? We know what today looks like. What about tomorrow? Are you a disciple on Monday? Are you a disciple on Tuesday? How about Thursday, Friday? Oh, don't get me started on Fridays. That's football night, baby. Don't get me started on Friday Night Lights. Are you a disciple on Friday? Are you a disciple every single day, no matter where you're at? The key to bearing fruit is abiding, living in Jesus. Let me ask you this. As we're thinking about this idea, because again, that's what Jesus is talking about. He's the vine, we're the branches. Okay, take a vine and branches and cut one of the branches off and throw it to the side. What's going to happen? Well, for a short time, won't it still look just like it did when it was attached to the vine? It will it not? For a time, it won't be immediately. As soon as it's taken off, you see it wilts up right there. No, for a short time, it will look just like it did when it was on the vine. Isn't it unfortunate? That's how it happens with people falling away from Jesus. Sometimes we don't even realize it because that's exactly how it happens. They're cut off completely from the vine. They've already made that decision. You just can't see it yet. And sometimes they can't even see it yet. They haven't wilted away completely, but they're cut off from the vine. They're headed that direction. And not only that, but think about this. What are the odds of that branch bearing fruit in the future apart from the vine? 0, right? It won't happen. It won't bear fruit anymore. That fruit that you were getting year after year after year, that's over with. It's been cut off from the vine. What are the odds of you bearing fruit if you're cut off from the vine? If you let anything at all stand between you and the true vine, it's 0. It won't happen. You will not bear fruit for Christ if you allow something to come between you and Him. It won't happen. Sure, you'll still look pretty for a while, for a short time. Some of you saying, I don't think so. It doesn't immediately lose its color, but it will never bear fruit again. So the key to bearing fruit is abiding. Now how about this next one? The key to abiding is obeying. Starting in verse 10. See, watch how this works. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. Just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in His love. These things I have spoken to you, so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be made full. The key to abiding in Jesus. How do we do it? How do we really live for Him every day? How do we make sure that nothing comes between that? Keep His commandments. Obey Him. I love verse 11. I love verse 11. These things I have spoken to you so that my joy may be in you. That is what I am trying to do. I don't want to go about this in a negative way. Absolutely not. What do we have to be negative about? We're members of the kingdom. We're partakers of God's grace. What do we have to be negative about? What do we have to be upset about? What reason do we have for being here and being anything less than excited about our faith? What do we have going on that can take us away from that? The answer is nothing if we're doing it right. These things I've spoken to you so that my joy may be in you and so that your joy may be made full. How many of you have ever been in a situation in your life where something was going on, you came to church and you left feeling full? How many times does that happen to some of us? It happens, right? We have something going on and it's dragging us down, but we get up, we drag ourselves to church, and we leave there feeling so much better about the situation. How many times does that happen to you? It happens, right? Isn't that the joy? The joy that comes from being a branch? Yeah, it doesn't sound all that exciting to you. The key to abiding is obeying. If we're going to abide, in other words, if we're going to live in Jesus, we're going to do so by obeying His words and His commandments. Up here on the screen, another passage. I love this one. 1 John chapter 2, starting in verse 4, says, "The one who says, I have come to know Him, and does not keep His commandments, is a liar." Well, I wouldn't want to be that. "And the truth is not in him. But whoever keeps His word, in him the love of God has truly been perfected. By this we know that we are in Him. The one who says he abides in Him ought himself to walk in the same manner as He walked." That's what it's all about, right? If we say that we abide in Him, then we can't do so by not obeying Him. We have to obey Him. The one who says, "I have come to know Him," and does not keep His commandments is a liar. So in a really practical sense, are you keeping His commandments? I mean, even when it's really, really hard, even when it's really, really inconvenient, are you obeying Jesus is the first question we have to ask. Are you really abiding and loving what He says? I want you to think about this for a second. I shared this with some of our youth this morning. I think this is really, really interesting. When you think about obeying, you're going to obey for one of three reasons. And we're going to segue into our last point in this. You're going to obey something for one of three reasons. Okay, no matter who you are, no exceptions. You can take this and you can apply it in your job. You can apply it in your relationship with your parents, whatever. You are going to obey something, anything, for one of three reasons. Reason number one, because you feel you have to. Because you feel you have to. That's one reason why you'll obey something. I'll tell you exactly what I mean. As a kid, how many times did you obey your parents, do exactly what they said you were going to do because you knew they were going to whip your hind end if you didn't? Oh yeah, we've been there, right? We've been there, right? Our parents say do something, and we're like, okay, I better do it, because if I don't do it, I'm going to get blistered, right? I knew that growing up, okay? I had that privilege of getting my butt spanked several times. A lot more than several, a whole bunch, a lot more than I can count. But you will obey, maybe for that one reason. That's one reason why you obey, because you feel you have to. It's about fear, right? You obey out of fear of punishment of some sort. Aren't there so many people today that obey or say they obey Jesus for that reason? Maybe that's where some of us are at. Maybe we find ourselves in situations where that's the whole reason we obey, because we're scared of hell. We're scared of punishment. And out of fear, we obey. But may I suggest to you that that's not the kind of obedience that Jesus is looking for. Reason number two why people will obey something is because they think that they need to. Now that sounds good, but it's not, okay? It's all about selfishness. I'll give you another example. Parents and kids. This is a teenager who tries to get on his parents' good side by obeying them so that when he turns 16, he'll get a brand new truck. That's the type of obedience we're talking about now. The type of obedience that says, I'll obey you and I'll get on your good side because of what's in it for me. That's one type of obedience, isn't it? You can obey for that reason. As I mentioned in youth this morning, so often we talk about heaven, and that's a great thing. Man, isn't heaven something to look forward to? We talk a lot about heaven, but I find that maybe sometimes when we go about this thing called being a disciple of Jesus, that's the way we look at it. I'm going to be obedient because I want to go to heaven. Folks, don't be obedient to Jesus because you want to go to heaven. That is not a good reason whatsoever. If you're in that situation where the whole reason you want to be faithful is because you want heaven, let's talk. Because that's not what we're shooting for. That's not the type of obedience that Jesus is looking for. But there's a third reason. I'm going to put this up here on the screen. The key to obeying is loving. So you'll obey something for one of three reasons: because you feel you have to. You're scared of punishment. Two, because you think you need to because you're selfish and you want what's in it for you, like obeying your parents because you want them to buy you a car. There's also a third reason that we will obey something, and that is because we want to. Right? You're going to obey for one of those three reasons. Anything. Apply this to your job, even. Maybe you obey your boss not really because you want to, but because, well, you know you have to if you're going to get paid at the end of the week. There's those three types of obedience. This is the type of obedience that Jesus is looking for. An obedience that says, I'm not in it because I'm scared. I'm not in it because I want to go to heaven. I'm in it because I love you and I want to do it. We sang the song here a few weeks ago, Pierce My Ear. And we explained what that song meant, but I want to talk about it again because I think it's a really cool picture. In the Old Testament, when slavery was going on, every 7 years, a year of Jubilee, the slaves were freed. And if you were a slave that loved your master, you could make the decision to not be a free man. You could decide, if you loved your master, that you would serve him. Not because you have to, not because you were scared, but because you wanted to, because you loved your master. And they would take and they would pierce your ear, and that would symbolically mean that you are now a bondservant of your master. In other words, you are a servant by choice. Paul mentions that several times, by the way. He mentioned being a servant by choice, a slave by choice to Jesus. The key to obeying is loving. Everything that we've discussed up to this point means absolutely nothing if we're not a people of love. Everything in the entire Bible, from Genesis on to Revelation, is all about love. If you don't believe me, come find me and we'll talk about it. Jesus summed up the entire Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, in 2 sentences. Hundreds of commands in the Bible, and Jesus summed every single one of them up in 2 sentences. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, as we just got through singing right before the message. All of it is summed up into those two sentences. Isn't that cool? It seems like, well, that's really kind of oversimplified. No, it's not. No, it's not. If you're a person who loves, everything else will fall into place. I promise. If you're a person who decides today, right now, you're going to love unconditionally, watch how all of your relationships in your life, watch how they come together. Watch how things come together. Watch how those temptations won't leave you, because our sinful nature doesn't leave, but watch how those temptations, they don't affect you at all. Watch how when you go about every single thing in life with love, it changes everything. Nothing that we've discussed, not bearing fruit, not abiding, obeying, none of that means anything if you're not a person who loves. As we mentioned, there's 3 reasons why you can obey. And as we look at John 15, Jesus is reaching out. He's saying, I want to have a relationship with you. Why do you obey Him today? I want you to think very seriously about that question. Why today, sitting right there, why do you obey Jesus? Is it because you feel you have to? Is it because you feel you need to for yourself? Or is it because you want to? Why do you obey Jesus? Or do you obey Jesus at all? We'll get to that more here in a second. If we don't find ourselves in situations, the key to knowing Jesus, having relationship, knowing who He is, the key to that is bearing fruit. The key to bearing fruit is abiding. The key to abiding is obeying. And the key to obeying is loving. And ladies and gentlemen, if we find ourselves skipping out on any of that, we will find ourselves being Christian by name and name only. That is all we will be. We will be a Christian by name only if we do not bear fruit, if we do not abide, if we do not obey, and if we do not love. You know, we offer up songs and invitations every time we're together. And maybe you're sitting there, and maybe you have come to the honest conclusion that you don't know Jesus. I want you to know that just as we talked about abiding in loving each other, and I want to read some more of that. I want to read again. I want to read starting in verse 12. We didn't do that. We got to read this together as we offer up invitation. I think that this is really important. This is my commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you slaves, for the slave does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all the things that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you, that you would go and bear fruit, and that your fruit would remain, so that whatever you ask of the Father in my name, He may give to you. And finally, this I command you, that you love one another. So we need to understand, of course, what it is to love each other. Are you devoted to that? Are you devoted to making sure that all this talking badly about someone, that stops? Are you devoted to seeking out relationship with someone that maybe there's been a damaged relationship? Do you love someone enough to when you have a problem with them, you'll go straight to them and talk to them about it, as Curtis mentioned a week ago? You have love in your heart? And with all that in mind, as we're offering up this song of invitation, I want to do this a little differently. Sometimes we kind of go through this pretty quick, and we do so with not a whole lot of expectation, really. I want to go through this with a lot of expectation. Maybe you're a person and you're in the audience today in the assembly this morning, and maybe you've come to the honest-to-goodness realization that you don't know Jesus at all. Maybe you've come to the honest conclusion that you're not bearing fruit, that you're not abiding, that you're not obeying, and that you're not loving. Maybe you've come to that honest-to-goodness conclusion. I want you to know that we here at the Shakota Church of Christ love you more than you could ever imagine. I want to reach out to those today that don't really know Jesus. I want you to know Jesus so bad I can't even explain it to you. If there's a person here today that does not know Him, we're willing to do whatever it takes on our end to get you there. Let's talk about it. We'll stay here all day if that's what it takes. The assembly right here, assembly, brethren, nod your head yes if you agree. We'll stay here all day long if that's what it takes to get you to know Jesus, because that's how much we care about you. We want you to be successful in your faith. We don't want you to be apart from Him anymore. We want you to know Him. And we want you to know that you know Him. We love you so much, and we're so glad that you're with us today. For our visitors, come back. We're glad that you're here. We want to talk to you. Let me talk to you. Let me get to know you. Let's talk about where you're at. This is a no judgment zone in that aspect, by the way. We're not here to decide what kind of person you are and whether or not you're going to heaven or if you're some kind, whatever. We're not here for that. We're here to help you. We're here to show you what a relationship with Jesus looks like and to help you get there. Whatever we can do to help you at all, please let us know. We want you to know Jesus. If that's your desire, please come as we stand and as we sing.